Here's a little story that everybody remembers growing up. I remember the day at your Mamaw's house. She was always babysitting me or my cousins or somebody. Now, my grandmother lived in a place called No Town, just outside of Minisboro, Kentucky. And she was a widow from my grandfather I've never met. He died from working in the coal mines after he just retired, 9 years before I was born. And she lived in a simple little place. She did have running water, but no indoor bathroom. You can see up the back here on the right side the little outhouse we used to use. And she would always babysit us kids, and she was never alone. Either us kids was with her, or her kids or her grandkids. And I'm just going to share a little story with you growing up of me and my cousins at a day at Grandma's. Now, Mom would always have to go on a Friday, sometimes a Saturday, most of the time on a Friday, go shopping for the family and for Mammy. We called my grandmother Mammy on my mom's side. And she'd take us up here to babysit, me and my brothers, and I had a sister. And I always had a bunch of cousins there too. We always had something going on. And I'd get out of that old finger mashing Ford, and when I was big enough to run, I was running all the time, just wide open. Around the house, around the fields, around up in the woods, anywhere I could just run. I loved to run around the house, always into something. Me and my brothers and my cousins. Now, like I said, I got two other brothers, knotheads. They tear up everything that I had, or I'd get blamed for everything that they tore up. And me and my cousins too, they was usually older than I was, and we'd run these fields and play in these woods and all day long, just stay outside. That was our playground. And on a good dry day, we would slide cardboard boxes down these fields, these old sage grass fields, and really have a good time. We used to have an old car hood that we'd get on, and we'd slide down here. It'd take 4 of us to pull it back up. And when you got hungry, Mammy always had a pot of beans on the stove. It didn't matter what time of day it was. There was always some soup beans on the stove. And she kept them fresh and always kept another pot going. And then when that, I always kept a pot of beans on the stove. You learn to love them old soup beans. But she knowed I liked fried taters. She'd always make me a pan of taters. Always. And I love them. To this day, I still love them. And every once in a while, she'd give us a little money. She needed something down at the store. So me and my cousins, we'd head down to the lane here to the store. And we'd check on the neighbors. They're elderly people too, and ask them if they needed anything at the store while we was out. And usually they'd want us to pick them up something, some bread or some pop or something. So we'd bring it back in the poke to them. And we'd go down here to we used to call Seal Medley store, down here on No Town Road. Here, you know what I'm talking about if you're from No Town. That's long gone. And we'd get in here and there's all kinds of goodies. We loved it, but we didn't have no money unless we found something from pop bottles. So we'd get what Mammy wanted. She usually wanted us to get a pound of bologna sliced up, and they'd wrap it up for you. And a loaf of bunny bread. We always got stuff like that for her. She may need something else. And I always got some Kool-Aid, because Kool-Aid would take care of a lot of people drinking, us cousins and my brothers and sisters. She had an old black and white TV. And on Saturdays, around 1 o'clock, I used to like to watch an old show would come on. And the name of it used to be, you probably remember it, was Old Shock Theater, WLOS, out of Asheville, North Carolina, Channel 7. Now here, I used to like watch stuff like this on Shock Theater. the old Gill man. Used to love stuff, that old sci-fi stuff. Well, it didn't last long, though, because my older cousin, she'd come in here, change the channel. She wanted to watch American Bandstand. But no, I wasn't having none of that. So before you know it, I was pulling her hair out. She's on top of me, beating, and Mammy come in there and pull us off each other. Well, after I got over that, I had to go take care of some business out here at the house. I hated going in that thing. You never know what's in that thing. Snakes or bees or waspers or whatever. I usually, just being no young boy, I'd go out in the woods if I could, because you just never know in these things. And these old waspers, they was the worst. They'd just sneak up on you. They'd hit you right in the back of the head or nothing. Ain't nothing worse than trying to run out of that outhouse with your britches down getting stung. And they do hurt, I'm telling you. And my uncles kept a bunch of old black and tan coon dogs and blue ticks, and I loved them. I loved them to death. I'd play with them for hours. And they loved to see me too. They was the nicest things. I love them to death. I love them dogs. Now, my grandmother kept a bunch of chickens around the house. Had a chicken coop, and let the chickens run around the yard during the day, and then they'd go in at night in the coop. And I had to learn the hard way when I was a young thing. You don't fool with them little baby chicks, you get flogged. I've been flogged 2 or 3 times. And my brothers, they younger than I was, they had to learn it the hard way too. But them old roosters was the worst. And when they give a lot of trouble, these old wash tubs, they was used for more than just washing, I'll tell you that right now. We always had some fresh fried chicken. And she had a lot of apple trees up here behind the house. June apples, them red late apples, they was so good. And some plum trees too. They wasn't nothing better tasting than them old big plums. She had some good ones there. And they had an old car sitting down here in the yard. One of my older cousins just got a BB gun, and he wanted to know what it was like to shoot a windshield in an old car, what it'd do. Well, here's what it done. And I got one of the worst whoopings of my life from my uncles just for just watching it. Had nothing to do with it, and I got blamed for it. And when the sun went down, sometimes we'd stay over a night with my Mamaw, Mammy. She'd always see us all out here, all just kids going crazy, trying to settle us down. So she'd pull us all together real close and start telling these stories. And before you know it, you could hear a pin drop. She'd talk about these old women and old witches that lived way back in these mountains that liked to get kids. And they'd come around at night and snatch these kids up. Well, they'd keep everybody quiet. And before you know it, it was raw head and bloody bones. Oh my goodness, I could just imagine what that monster looked like. Used to scare us to death. And we'd stay over in a back room there, and in that back room it had a window there with no curtains on it. It was always just jet black through that window. And all them stories I'd been hearing and everything, I couldn't help but look and watch that old window. Just imagine what I'd see from what Mammy'd been telling us these stories. I was scared to death, little old bitty thing. And before you know it, my imagination run away. I would see things in that window, hand prints or somebody's face. It never failed. It just kept me scared to death, these tales she'd always tell me. I'd lay there in that bed, trying my best not to look at that window, but I couldn't help myself. I had to look at that window. But I'd finally go off to sleep from just sheer exhaustion. And up next morning, Mammy's up cooking breakfast for us kids. Whoever was there, she loved to cook. Always had something going on for us. And Mom or Dad would pull up that morning, and that old finger mashing Ford, I call it, they'd gather us all up, all us knot-headed brothers of mine and my sister, and we'd all load up fighting for position in the seats in that back seat. and we'd head on out of here going home. Did you mind your mammy while you was there? Oh, of course we did. Yeah, okay. Well, that's all history now. Here's my mammy. She's been gone 36 years now, and I miss her so much. Her place is gone now. It's tore down and gone. But for her memory, I drawed a picture of it. So, I hope you enjoyed this little story. I know you got memories too of being at your grandma's. So I hope you enjoyed. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.